Welcome to the Beef Lab. I'm your host, Coach Joe Strong, here at the Mecca of Strength and Conditioning, Varsity House Gym. The Beef Lab is an inside look at everything it takes to run a world-class training facility. This is the source for strength entrepreneurs who want to learn more about programming, training athletes, business development, and marketing their brand. We're going to show you how we took Varsity House from a dingy little garage gym to a world-class brand. Hey gang, Coach Joe here, Varsity House Gym. Welcome to our next edition of the Beef Lab. Today we're going to talk about speed. What is speed? How do we get it? What are some of the parameters of speed training? And just kind of go through a little bit more of an understanding of what it really means to be fast. And this is kind of a reiteration of an article I wrote a couple of years ago called Stop Calling for Speed Classes, and I'm going to hit on a bunch of the points, and I've updated some of that article and added some things to it. As always, we will put the article and some of the show notes up on the website. I will put together a few training days and show you some different types of speed and performance training ideas. And let's just break it down and try and keep it as simple as possible and really get an understanding. We get a lot of parents that come in the door and they say to me, we want our kids to do speed classes. And I say, well, we don't really have a speed class. We have a performance training program that includes speed work, but also includes strength training, flexibility, mobility, things like that, conditioning. And they said, well, he doesn't need to strength train, he just needs to get fast. And, it really, to me, it just like, I want to lose my mind sometimes, but the reality is that most people just have no clue. They just really don't know. And a lot of the parents, think about it, they're either my age or older, so they're 40 to 60-year-old parents who were taught by their coaches and parents 20 years prior to that. So their ideology of speed training and performance training is very archaic. Remember that gyms like this didn't exist 15 years ago. So the world of strength and conditioning, especially youth strength and conditioning, is very infantile in its stage of development. It's in 50 years. Maybe people will get it. So, we get a lot of people come in, and here are some of the biggest misconceptions. That speed training and strength training are separate processes. And my contention is that although they are separate motor skills, and in a sense are separate activities, they are one and the same. Strength training is improving the muscular system's ability to create force, and running speed is nothing more than the amount of force you can create versus your body weight and the force of gravity. So the more strength I have, the greater force I can produce, the faster I can move. The other thing is that speed training alone will make you faster. And that is not true at all. Right? You can do speed training till you're blue in the face. If you do not have good mechanics or the body strength to propel yourself, you will only get moderately fast. Okay? And within that then are the other misconception is that running is running, and that if I want to get fast, I just need to run a lot. So I see this especially a lot in my young female athletes. And I talked a little bit about this with last week when I did the podcast on nutrition with Simone, was that all female athletes are fighting a sociological, psychological type of battle between being an athlete and wanting to be a pretty young girl. And so a lot of girls associate running with being thin, and they run 3, 4, 5 miles a day, and they're a sprinter or a basketball player, and that in a sense becomes counterproductive to the actuality of producing sport-specific force. An example, and you'll read the article, this is going back quite a few years now, but I had a client who had been with me for years, whose older son played football and trained with me since he was very young. So the second son, the younger son, started training with me. He was a sprinter, a 400-meter sprinter. And the dad told me that he spoke to some speed guys and they said he should run cross country. And I said, well, that's great if you want him to get slow and not really be any good at running the 400, that's fine, and you could run cross country. If you want to put those extra 30, 40, 50 miles a week on him and in a sense take away from his ability to create force, sure, go ahead and run cross country. That sounds like a brilliant idea. But obviously I'm being sarcastic, because 100 meter, 200 meter, and 400 meter are sprint activities. High levels of explosive force are required. If that same athlete was a miler, I would say, sure, run cross country. Many of my milers will run cross country. The mileage needed to be a good miler in the aerobic system is qualified for cross country. The anaerobic power needed to run a 400 meter is not qualified for cross country. They are two totally separate energy systems. And if you think of training like a pie chart, anything that I do a lot takes away from the other things. So if all I do is aerobic, 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 the other things have to shrink. You can't just create a bigger pie, a larger pie. It doesn't exist. So you only have 100% of your physical abilities. If I spend 80% of the time doing aerobic work, I only have 20% of everything else left. So you have to train within your sport. And the two examples that I give you is that Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world, doesn't run for miles. He's probably never run a single mile in the last several years. It would be completely counterproductive to his ability to generate explosive force. So he's not running, especially not cross country, 5 to 10 miles a day. And another example is on the other end of the spectrum, a guy like a Mariusz Pudzianowski or a Brian Shaw, the world's strongest man, they're not doing step aerobics and they're not running for mileage to develop their strength, right? You want to be a strongman, you want to squat and deadlift, thousands of pounds, you have to lift heavy weights, right? So those are some of the biggest misconceptions. It's mostly just the parents are uneducated, especially when it comes to, the physiology of, they just see what's on the field. They know that speed is important for sports and they want to get it. So we have to re-educate them a little bit. So let me break down some of the truths, right? So remember, speed is a complicated physiological process, neurophysiological process, right? Requiring communication between the nervous systems and the muscles. It also requires the bone structure, inherent genetics, the types of muscle tissues that you have, and technical ability, right? So speed training can be improved through technical ability. So when I break this down, I do a lecture on speed training and neuromuscular abilities every year at the university I teach at, and I break it down into basically two categories: innate abilities and learned abilities. And so we'll break those down in each section. Let me just go through some of the innate process, right? So Usain Bolt was born to run, and he will always and has always been fast. There was something inside his genetics and something inside of him that predetermined his greatness. Now, I know here in America that we don't like to hear that little Johnny can be anything he wants to be, but it's simply not true, right? The reality is that not everybody was meant to be Usain Bolt, a Brian Urlacher, a Lawrence Taylor, right? There's a reason why they write books and do documentaries on those people, because they are special, right? And what made them special was their genes. And by the miracle of, genetic, soup that occurs when the male and female genes come together, the randomness that occurs led to, specific genes that led to improved muscular abilities, neurological abilities, and a predisposition for speed. And no matter what, if your mom and dad were 5'2" and, built like little trash cans in a sense, like little Bulgarian shot putters, the chances of you being 6'5" and long and lean are very small. Okay, so whereas if your parents were All-American track stars or All-American athletes who were tall, long, lean, and athletically built, you have a greater predisposition for that. You are what your parents made you, right? And you were going to fall somewhere close to that spectrum, and there's nothing you can do about that. Okay? So your genes are your number one thing. You just can't change what you have to work with. The Russians and the Chinese were great at selection of athletes because they looked at the parents and the gene lineage, and they would say, well, the chances of you being, a elite diver, because you have to be super small and lean and skinny to be an elite diver, well, are small. Your dad was a sumo wrestler, and your mom, is a sumo, and what do they call it? A female sumo wrestler, or some type of Chinese weightlifter or something like that. Your chances of being the diver are small, so you're going to go into weight training or whatever it might be. You're going to go into Olympic weightlifting. So they would select their athletes based on, predispositions. And then they would expose them to a bunch of different things. Here in this country, we just do it the parents do it by what they think is right for their kids, not what is actually right for their physiology. So genes are number one. The second thing is called neuromuscular efficiency, right? And this is a very complicated topic, so I'm going to simplify it in a nutshell and use some analogies to simplify it. But basically, the brain and central nervous system have to communicate with the muscles. And there is an efficiency to that process. And together that's called neuromuscular efficiency. And you can think of it as some people are wired better than other people. And some people have fiber optic HDMI cable, and some people have coaxial, right? The fiber optic HDMI cable can send way more information at a much greater speed than the coaxial cables. Some people's nervous system is just better than others. They got lucky. They got the genetic win when it came to the nervous system. For whatever reason, either their parents and what they were exposed to, and or what the kid was exposed to at a very early age while the nervous system was developing. Remember, the nervous system is developing from conception, from about 6 to 8 weeks of fetal development through adulthood. What you expose yourself to at a very young age helps develop that nervous system. Being a little couch potato, right, at a young age and sitting there playing on your iPad at 5, 6 years old, right, nowadays, does not lead to any great changes in the nervous system that improve neuromuscular efficiency. Okay? So this has a lot to do with your genetics, but it also has a lot to do with your upbringing and what you exposed yourself to at a very young age. Yesterday I'm speaking to one of my athletes, and they said, well, how come the Russians and the Chinese, how come the Chinese kick our butts in Olympic weightlifting? How they're so much better than us. And I said, well, because they start at a very young age. They go to, weight training camps, and some of them will start as young as, 3 or 4 years old, practicing some of the movements of Olympic weightlifting. The neuromuscular efficiency that they develop to those movements is so highly in tuned that an American, right, who decides that maybe high school, or college, most Americans' exposure to Olympic weightlifting doesn't occur until university, and it usually occurs from exposure from another sport. We did the episode with the girls on female athletic training, and like a girl like Sinead, who's very strong, didn't start doing any Olympic weightlifting until she got to college. So it would be impossible for her to catch up to an elite level, an Olympic level athlete who started training when they were 5 years old. That neuromuscular ability is so ingrained from a young age that you can't overcome that no matter how much she trained at an older age, right? You've just lost too much time, right? So, bottom line there, again, it's something inherent, but it also comes down to exposure, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, is that, you got to get off your butts, and you got to get your kids active at a young age, swimming, gymnastics, things that include a lot. Martial arts was my thing. I started training in martial arts when I was 5, and I really do credit that to my inherent ability to control my body. I'm not the greatest athlete in the world, and I never will run like Usain Bolt, but I have really good body control, body awareness, explosive power development, and ability, and in a sense, I'm well-rounded because of the well-rounded nature, I believe, of swimming and martial arts. And those were the two sports that I started with. Swimming when I was born, basically. My father was a big swimmer, so 2 years old, I was in the lake learning how to swim. And then, I started doing martial arts when I was 5, and those were my main sports all the way through till I was about 12. I started playing a little baseball, and I didn't play football until I got to high school, right? Football and wrestling kind of became the sports that I got into in high school. So the swimming is inherently athletic and requires a tremendous amount of coordination. And martial arts, at my level, I was highly competitive. I competed internationally in martial arts and karate, required tremendous body control, coordination, and all levels of conditioning, explosive power, flexibility, mobility, and so forth, right? So those are great sports. Gymnastics is another great sport to get a young athlete into, no matter what, boy or girl, because it teaches body awareness, body control, balance, coordination, stuff like that. The third thing under innate abilities is muscle composition. Okay, everybody's muscles are differently. Again, going down to your is composed differently. Everybody going to your genetics, right? Some people, there are several types of muscle fibers. Most people have heard of type 2B, right? There's type 2A, and there's type 1. Type 2B are the fast twitch muscle fibers, right? That create a tremendous amount of force but gas out kind of quickly. Type 2A are these mid-range muscles that are kind of in the middle. They produce a decent amount of force, but can sustain that contraction for a slightly longer period of time. And then type 1 are the aerobic muscle fibers. Everybody has a different percentage. Men over women. Men have more explosive muscle fibers than women do, generally. And depending on, again, your genetics, right? If your parents were elite level endurance athletes, there is a much greater predisposition for you to have a higher percentage of type 1 muscle fibers, as opposed to maybe if your mom or dad were Olympic weightlifters, right? And depending on your lineage, exposure, again, right, what you expose yourself to. Now, again, just like with neuromuscular efficiency and exposing yourself to a variety of movements at a young age, again, exposing yourself to certain types of movements that are either aerobic or anaerobic or in the middle, right? You can have what's called subtype conversion, right? Where the muscle fibers will actually convert to the other types of muscle fibers over a period of time due to the exposure and the stress placed on them. Those muscle fibers will change, and you can subtype transformation with some of those muscle fibers and become more anaerobic or become more aerobic depending on what you expose yourself to. However, okay, when you look at the greatest endurance athletes or you look at the greatest strength athletes, right, you have to have some genetic inherent ability to achieve the elite levels. To win the Tour de France, you have to be extremely special in all aspects. Your training needs to be ridiculous. Your work ethic, off the charts. Your nutrition, incredible. And you have to have immeasurably perfect genes to be able to win, because you're going against the absolute smallest crew of a couple hundred people that are the absolute freakiest endurance athletes in the world, right? So to win something like that requires a combination of all things, not just genetics, but everything together, culminating in one perfect moment of ability and genetics, right? And that's what a lot of people here fail to realize, and a lot of the parents here fail to realize, is they're looking at oh, he's a D1 athlete. Well, I see D1 athletes every day, and I see a lot of 1A, 1AA, D2, D3, and not cut out for college athletes all the time, right? And I can usually spot them just by looking at them, and I can tell a parent almost instantly where that kid's going. Probably by the time they're 16, 17 years old tops, right? By junior year, I'm pretty dead on. Me and my partner Dan, Dan's even better at it than I am, and you can just tell body structure, body type, size. I'll tell a parent flat out, look, 1AA ball, it's a little bit of a stretch. You're not that big, you're not that fast. No offense. You want to play, you want to have a nice college career, and you want to get on the field and play. Stay at a local college and play D3 ball and have some fun, and you're not going to the NFL. So, and the last thing on the innate list is just bone structure. The bones and how they are structured is a critical process in overall speed and performance ability. The bones are the levers in which the muscles pull upon. So the muscles are the working engines in a sense, like a winch, and they pull upon the levers, the joints, right, and the bones to create action, to create work. Okay? Everybody's bone structure is different. When was the last time you saw a 5'2", 3 foot wide Olympic sprinter? I've never seen one. When was this last time you saw a 6'8", 200-pound, string bean of an Olympic weightlifter? I've never seen one, right? LeBron James isn't built for Olympic weightlifting, right? He's built for basketball and athletic ability. In the same respect, Olympic weightlifters generally aren't built for speed. Now, they might be explosive as hell and can generate a tremendous amount of power, right? In a 10-yard sprint, some Olympic weightlifters might beat the Olympic sprinters off the 10-yard mark because of the power. But once they stand up and the length of their legs defeats them, right? And the bulkiness of their running action, right, defeats them, right? You watch Usain Bolt, he looks like a freaking gazelle. It looks effortless. It looks like he's not even trying, right? Those legs look like they're detached from his body, like the Roadrunner. He's winning now because he's so tall, because his speed training, his strength training, and his genetics, right? His leverage systems, his neuromuscular efficiency, and the type of muscle fibers that he has in his body are the best that we've ever seen, and that's why he's a world record holder and the fastest man that's ever lived. So, you can't deny those things. So again, you have to, parents, especially parents, you have to be realistic with what you're looking at. If your son, is kind of heavy, carrying a bunch of weight and things like that, and is a broad-bodied, shorter, kind of stocky individual, football may be a good sport, baseball, other things that don't require the innate running speed that track or true speed is. And speed is a relative term, because remember, like an offensive lineman doesn't need to be as fast as a wide receiver. So it really is relative. My wrestlers are quick, explosive, and they have good speed within their sport. But when it comes to upright field sport running speed, everybody's looking for the magic potion, and it really 90% of it, let's say 80% at best, right? And that's giving you a couple percentage points, comes down to your overall genetics, right? And then the last 10 to 20% are the learned abilities that I'm going to talk about now that you can actually improve upon. So now that I've crushed everybody's dreams of being fast and running in the Olympics, the reality is that everybody can get faster, and you can get faster and more agile and more explosive. You might never be fast, though. I have built myself up to being a faster, more athletic athlete as I've gone through the years, through training. I have never been truly fast. I am not a sprinter, right? That's not my sport. I'm a I can create a lot of explosive force in short distances, in short bursts, but I do not have the proper mechanics, nor nor leverage systems, nor neuromuscular efficiency. Our coach Madi Williams that's here, when he runs, it just looks different. He was born for speed. He's built for speed. It looks different. It feels different. He runs on his toes. He's got great angles. And it makes it look so easy. I'm like, I'm trying to run hard as hell, right? I'm more like a rhino. He's more like the gazelle, right? But everybody, that said, everybody can improve. Everybody can get a little bit better. So even little Johnny, who's maybe built like a little tree stump, right, and should be an offensive lineman, can still improve his speed and explosive power by working on it, right? So what are some of the learned skills that you can improve upon? Number one is strength. Easy. Get stronger, right? Speed is moving your body weight against the force of gravity. If I have a 185-pound athlete who can barely squat his own body weight, who can barely do a single leg lunge with half his body weight, okay, they are not going to be very fast. We look for 2 times your body weight strength in the squat and at least body weight in a single leg lunge. Okay, so that means that my 185-pound athlete should be able to squat 370 pounds, right? And be able to lunge with 185 pounds on the bar, right? That same athlete at the same body weight, one who's highly trained and can create a tremendous amount of explosive muscular force, will absolutely run faster than the other athlete. Now, barring proper training, field sport speed is different than track speed. Track speed being you have to have perfect technical ability for longer stretches of time. On a football field, very rarely are you running more than 20, 30 yards at a clip, and most of the team is running more than 10 yards at a clip. So it's more about change of direction, acceleration, and that places more of an emphasis on strength, because strength will help you with the start and stop and change the direction of movements way more, okay, than just straightaway speed, right? Straightaway speed is kind of a little bit more different, especially a little bit more complicated, especially when it comes to specific track speed. Track runners have to train differently than field sport athletes. We create explosive speed here in the gym because we mostly train field sport athletes. My track athletes follow a slightly different protocol. The other thing is flexibility. Now, I've mentioned the article a bunch of times, but I wrote an article called Flexibility 101. I will leave the link on the show notes so you can check that article out as well. And that goes over everything on flexibility, so a lot more detailed than what I'm going here. But again, flexibility allows range of motion and movement, right? If I'm very bound up, I'm never gonna have a good cycling action when I'm running. I'm never gonna be able to really drive my knees and extend my legs and use my hips to run. It's always gonna be like kind of a shuffle, right? One, it also leads to a lot of injuries and just makes the running action way less efficient, okay? Again, going back to some of my football players, because football is a varietal game, right? You have big, heavy guys, you have medium-sized guys, and you have athletes on the edges, the wide receivers and D-backs and things like that. So you have all different levels, right? Well, when a offensive lineman runs, right, they generally look stiffer, lumbering, harder, you know, and not as clean driving the legs. And then you see the wide receiver who's running a 4.3 40, right, looks like a totally different thing, right? So flexibility is a big part of that. You think about your muscles as elastic bands. The more I can stretch them, the more kinetic energy they store, the greater the force of recoil is. And so as I'm running, watch Usain Bolt. Look up a video on YouTube of Usain Bolt running. Those legs are reaching out, grabbing the ground way ahead of them and pulling and pulling and pulling. You can't do that if you're all bound up and your flexibility is really terrible. So that's a big part of what we work on with our field sport athletes, is getting really mobile, getting highly mobile, okay? The third thing is body composition, right? If you're carrying 20, 30 pounds of fat and excess body weight, you can't run fast. So I see a lot of athletes, he needs to work on his speed work, and he's a little chubster. Well, how about work on the diet at home, right? Get them cleaned up a little bit. Get some of that excess body fat off them, right? You're trying, imagine if you took a like one of those little tiny Isuzu pickups, right? That they used to have those little 4-cylinder pickups, right? You got this little Isuzu pickup, right? And I put 5,000 pounds of weights in the back of it. What's going to happen to the engine? Right? It's going to blow, right? It just doesn't have the power. Same thing here. I got a young athlete, let's say 13, 14 years old, 30 pounds overweight, right? With a tiny little engine trying to move that big body. It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. It's like a hamster trying to run that thing, right? It's not going anywhere. So body composition is a huge part of it. Look at all the Olympic athletes. And in that respect, look at all the great athletes, other than a few offensive line and defensive linemen who were bigger, heavier dudes, right? Like a Warren Sapp, who just happened to be a genetic freak, and explosive, who had a little bit of a gut, but he was a powerful, powerful man, right? But look at any athletic runners, the top soccer players in the world, the top volleyball players in the world, the top sprinters in the world, right? Lean and ripped. Lean and ripped, right? Most of the best athletes in the world, wide receivers, lean and ripped, right? So if you want to be fast, lean and ripped, okay? Get rid of that body weight, get your diet straight, clean it up, right? And lose some of that body fat. You know, if I put a 20-pound vest on you and tell you to run around the gym, it's going to be a lot harder than without the vest. So think about it like that. Number 4 is technical running practice. Speed is a learned motor skill, right? And if you start running track at a young age, I guarantee that you will be faster at an older age. Guaranteed, right? That is one of my pet peeves, all these parents to get their kids into crappy, unathletic sport. I'm sorry, I love softball girls, I love baseball boys, right? But they're inherently unathletic at the base of what they are, right? You're standing around most of the time, right? So if that's all you ever did, right, your ability to run is not going to be great. I mean, little kids, best sport, I'm telling you, it's gymnastics, it's swimming, it's martial arts, it's soccer, okay? And maybe when they get to be 6, 7, 8 years old, right, when they start to have some organized track and field, right, and teach them how to run and compete, running hard, right? You run next to another kid, you're trying to race each other. Like, it was just different when I was a little kid. We just went out in the backyard and did that stuff. Now you have to sign a kid up for something, right? So technical running practice is a key skill. We teach our athletes how to run with good form. We teach them how to cut and move and be agile, how to control their body weight and lean into and out of their cuts and so forth, and that is a learned process that you can improve on. If you don't do it, you'll never get better at it, right? So again, the best athletes in the world are generally people who had great genetics, like Herschel Walker, right? He happened to play a ton of sports and practice a ton of running and jumping and sprinting, but he was a freak of nature, right? That did that stuff too, and that's why he's Herschel Walker. He's in the Hall of Fame. They write books, they do documentaries, they got biography, you name it, E60, E30, you know, A Football Life, Herschel Walker this, Herschel Walker that. Still a freak of an athlete. He's 50-something years old. He's still competing in athletics. He's still an unbelievably fit man, genetic freak, right? Who took great genes and then trained hard and worked at his craft, speed and performance, and then made it even better. Right? So nothing translates to running, right, like running. If you want to get better at running, you got to run, sprint, and jump. If you want to be a fast track athlete or a field sport athlete, you got to run sprints on top of sprints on top of sprints all the time, right? And yeah, it's something you have to work on and improve on. Okay? A lot of the athletes will do other things, right? A lot of general pop, like CrossFit people. I do a lot of conditioning, right? I do the rower, I do the skier, I do all that stuff too, but that's not making me run fast. You could ski and row and bike till you're blue in the face, and it's not going to help you run. Running translates to everything. If you're an awesome runner and you're in great running condition, you'll pick those things up way faster. Okay? And the last thing for speed is training, right? And again, I'm going to lay out a couple basic training, templates, and I will, I'm going to go into a lot more detail in another episode on our performance program and some of our strength training and programming here. But this is the greatest variable that you can control. I can train my butt off and get stronger, I can work on my athletic ability and sprint speed and change of direction speed. I can work on my flexibility. I can work on my muscular endurance and conditioning. And I can put that all together into a program and work on it weekly. And over a period of months and years, if my program is good, if I have a good coach, if I have a good system that's progressive and that's constantly pushing the envelope of my physical abilities, they will continue to grow. And it's almost like the analogy I use is like a spiral. They just keep growing and growing and growing. As long as you're doing it right and you don't get injured and you're training smart and you're eating healthy, you can push those things up towards a physiological max, right? Everybody has a physiological ceiling. Again, if I trained with the best coaches in the world, let's say I went to train with the Jamaican sprint team, and I had the best track coaches, and I hired all the best nutritionists and all the best, training physiologists and doctors, and you name it. I got a team. I'm like the Bruce Wayne of working out, right? I got billions of dollars to spend on finding me the best of everything. I'm never, ever beating Usain Bolt in any type of race, anywhere, anytime. Never happening, doesn't matter. It's just not in the cards, even if I was 20 years younger, right? So there's a reality to that. Now, I might be able to get a lot better than where I am now because of that, but there is a physiological limit, and that was predetermined by my parents, right? And by my genes, and that really is just the base of it, okay? So you need to be on a specific athletic development training plan. If you're just out training haphazardly, and I'm not picking on CrossFit, if you're just doing like a CrossFit general fitness workout, right, it's not going to translate to athletic ability. Okay, just working out is just working out. Is it better than not doing anything? Possibly, but I've seen a lot of injuries to athletes from just doing general population, general fitness, GPP type of training, because you're doing too much workload in the gym, and then you're adding sport practice and training to that, and there's a breakdown because the program is not set up specifically for exemplifying your athletic abilities. It's just general training. So I'm hitting 2K rows, 100-calorie airdyne runs, and I'm doing a lot of things that maybe I shouldn't be, that are kind of taken away from my ability to train for my sport. Okay? So you got to get with a good coach. You got to get on a good program. Go out and find a good sprint school. Go out and find a good training center like ours here. Maybe hook yourself up with a track, and like an AAU track team or something like that to go run. Find a good sprint coach or a speed coach out there and start practicing your technique. Get your diet right, start training, and you will improve. You might never be fast in the true sense of speed. You might never go to the Olympics for track and field, but you can absolutely improve your ability, okay? And that we see that here every single day in the gym for the last 20 years, an improvement of taking athletes who are not inherently athletic and making them something, and that definitely can happen, all right? It doesn't mean you're getting a full scholarship, and again, it doesn't mean that you're gonna be an Olympic athlete, but you can improve. And also, most of the improvement comes from the strength training. Right? The creation of more strength and power allows for faster locomotive work. Okay? So I hope this sheds a little light on what speed really is, some of the ideas around speed and what it means to be fast. Right? Because it's very sport specific, and it's variable to the genetic ability of the athlete, what they're exposed to, and what they're willing to do to fix it, whether it's training, flexibility, mobility, sprint training, things like that. Okay? And again, I cannot state it enough how relative the term speed is to the sport that they're playing. We train a lot of female indoor volleyball players. They need to be quick and explosive, but upright running speed, they never move more than 5 or 6 feet in any direction, right? Most of them, it's jumping, hitting, setting, right? Things like that. What is speed to that athlete compared to, a 100-meter track sprinter? Very different. So my 100-meter track athlete doesn't do agility speed drills. That's another type of speed. My field sport athletes do, but that just takes away from 10 more sprints that I could have done, right? As opposed to the field sport athlete that has to learn how to change direction. Again, quickness and speed are all different relative terms. My offensive lineman needs a different type of speed than my wide receiver, right? So make sure that whatever program, whatever sport you're training for, and the program that you're trying to instill on your athletes is consistent with what they actually have to do and what their relative term and relative ability needs to be and what speed means to them. Okay? There's no sense in trying to make your offensive lineman a track athlete. It's never going to happen. So don't train them like a track athlete. And just at the same respect, there's no sense in trying to make your track athlete a field sport athlete, because that's taken away from what they need to do as well. All right. Remember that your body adapts to the stress that you place upon it, and that if you continuously stress the body with different types of stimulus like strength training, flexibility, mobility, you will start to cause a change. And over a period of time, you can improve your ability. That takes months to years of training, right? There is no quick fix for speed. I can get you more explosive. I can get you in better condition in a short period of time. The likelihood of me changing your ability to run in 3, 4, 5, even 6 weeks is very small. We get combine athletes that come in here all the time and they expect me to make a world-changing ability in 6 weeks, but you have to remember that they are already a very high-level athlete. So all I'm doing is teaching them the proper technical ability to run the specific drills. So again, make sure that you pick exercises and you pick training methodologies that are consistent with what you do on the field, on the track, or within your sport. Our wrestlers don't train like they don't need to run like that. So it's more about power development, right? Power, pushing the prowler is way more transferable to a wrestler than let's say trying to run 100-meter sprints. It's not bad, it's not terrible, but a wrestler never takes more than 3 or 4 steps. So think of it like that. So I hope you liked. Again, we broke it down, some basics of speed. I hope you like what you saw. I'll put all the show notes up with some training methodologies and a couple sample training programs, the link to the flexibility article on the website. Make sure you give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Make sure if you're watching us on YouTube that you subscribe to our channel and you give us a thumbs up, right? Check us out on varsityhousegym.com. We have tons of information and some really exciting new things coming out for the new year. A new website, membership site. You're going to be able to join our membership site and get tons and tons of training articles and actually follow us along with our training here in the gym. So stay tuned for that. That should be coming out really soon into the new year. And check back next week for another episode of the Beef Lab. Next week's episode is going to be on youth athletic development, year-round specialization, and the death of youth sports in America. All right? See you next time, everybody.